Schumann, and today we are going to be diving into Paul's hidden story. And I think Paul is amazing and one of the world's experts, and I know, Paul, you are, on debt and on all things negotiation. So we're going to dive into a little bit about what you do, how you do it, but we're also going to dive into your hidden story. So we've got a little bit of feedback here. I'm talking about how amazing you are on the other video. Okay, Connie, we get it. We get it. Okay, so we're going to dive into your hidden story. So for those of you that have not connected with Paul, connect with Paul. Paul is absolutely amazing in terms of debt, negotiations, all of that. Today, we're going to be focused on you as a person and on your hidden story and uncovering that. And I love that you're so open and willing. And you said, I don't really know what this is about, Connie, but I'm willing to do it. And here we go. So Paul, I'm going to share with you a little bit of an overview of what's going to happen during this very interesting conversation. Sound good?
Yeah, I wish you'd have told me before.
You are so brave, Paul. I love it. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is just asking questions about you. We're going to be uncovering your hidden story. There's going to be times where I'm going to mute myself and I'm typing. The only reason I do that is because that's how I process information and I process your story. The other thing to be aware of is when I'm working with individuals in terms of telling their story, I'm working with them for hours and we're drawing out the full story in terms of their business, their personal and their customer journey. I know we don't have hours right now. We've got about 15 minutes or so to dive into the story, but I promise I'll give you everything that I've got and dive in as much as we can during this time together. Sound good?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, awesome. Okay, Paul, let's start. Can you please tell me what has the divine put you here to do through your work?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What has the divine, the creator, God, whoever you believe, a higher power to put you here to do through your work?
That's a really interesting question. I think this is something that it's probably something I've done all my life, but in different realms of it, even from when I was a little kid helping people. And as I went up through high school, helping other students, and as I grew through college, helping friends in my frat, I was considered the father of my frat because I helped everybody. And it's just something that I've done all my life. Even in real estate, I was basically the broker on both the buyer and the seller ends on almost everything. And I'd sit down and I'd brainstorm with people and make sure everything was just the right way. And I was always helping people, even up to the point where I play Santa Claus helping kids. It's something in me that it lights me up when I can help somebody do something. And it's just who I've always been. That helps.
You are amazing. Okay, can you walk me through how do you do the work that you do in about a minute? Now, I know that you're an expert at what you do, and we could talk about this for hours, but I want to know sequentially, how do you do the work that you do? First, I do this, Connie, then I do this. Walk me through it in about a minute.
Okay, if I only have a minute, the first thing I do is I do exactly what I do as a real estate broker for 40 years. I talk to the buyer seller, which is the debtor and the creditor. I find out where their heads are. I find out how much, anger or whatever issue there is with the creditor for not being paid. And I talk to the debtor to find out just how serious their financial problems are and what wherewithal they have. Then I sit down and I work with the creditor and come up with a solution. I get it in writing. I sit down with the debtor saying, will this work for you? And if they say yes, they have to sign a written agreement. And then the debtor sends a check to the creditor and it's 100% settled, paid off. And within it, I do my best to make sure that it removes the line item from their credit report, so it removes the derogatory. That's pretty much how we do it. But it's getting into the mindset of both sides. And that's what I've learned for years. It's 70% of all settlements and negotiations is emotional. And you've got to find out where the mindset is of the other person to be able to settle it. Now, I can tell you some stories that are pretty wild on getting inside somebody's head. And I've learned this also, and I'm taking more than a minute. that when I was reading Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, who was the top FBI hostage negotiator in the world, he also has said almost the same things, is that in order to understand to save a person's life, you've got to get inside the head of the kidnapper and find out what they really want. And most of the time, it's not about money. They either want sensationalism, they want to state the facts, have they been wronged by the public, how, atrocities that have been happening when these massive hostage negotiations are out there. It's all about it's politics. And it's not just about money. Money always seems to be the smallest part of it. It's emotion.
Oh my gosh, so amazing. Okay, Paul. So I forgot to ask you, this is so amazing. And I know I've had you on one of my episodes before, and we talked for 40 minutes because I couldn't let you off the conversation because it was too good. And I know myself, I know that I could listen to you for hours. However, I also know that in this session, we're going to be getting to your hidden story. Okay. So I want you to know there will be times, and I want to ask your permission, there will be times where I'm going to need to interrupt you just so that I can get to the story, because I know you are an expert and have done this work for so long that you're going to have a lot of stories, and I'm looking for very specific stories. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just don't know what the specific stories are.
Okay, I'll walk you through it. Are you okay? Are you okay if we do that?
I'm ready.
Okay, perfect. Tell me, how is what you do different than anybody else that does the work that you do? Debt negotiation, how is what you do different?
Different. Well, one, there are no payment plans. Two, there's no upfront money. There's no admin fees. There's no consultation fees. And probably what I do best for the ones of all the companies that I've worked with in the past, hundreds of them, is I do more than debt settlement with them because of my background in personal growth development that I've spent probably $80,000, $90,000 going to systems. Is I'll sit down with them and going, okay, what got you into trouble? Was it the economy or was it something happening in management? And like I solved one person's problem who called me up 14 years later and said, Paul, he says, just so you know, you changed my company's life. And I said, Bill, what happened? He says, well, settling the debts. I says, yeah, settling the debts was easy. He says, but no, it was one step more. You taught me and explained to me that when you talked to all the managers in my department, they didn't know what was going on. In other words, the market and research didn't know what sales was doing, and development didn't know what the other company was doing. They didn't know. So therefore, they were going on different paths, and it was slowing the process down. So 14 years later, he tells me he went from 14 employees when I had him to 400 employees.
That's
and
amazing.
he just sold his business for a huge profit. And he called me up and said, Paul, I just sold it. He says, now I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. So I said, Bill, let me coach you. You can teach so many people how you turned your company around and made it profitable and expanded it in the same industry that you're already in. Yeah. So I'm working with them doing that right now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I love it so much. Paul, can you share with me, why did you decide to do this work?
It was an accident. And I can say this happened in 1993 when I first started. What had happened was I had been in real estate now then since 1972. So it was almost 20 years. The market had taken a downturn. And the manager of my company was working with me. He said, Paul, he says, you're burned out. Go do something else. At that time, I had this aversion because of something that happened in my past, which is another whole story, that made me very connected to people in a holistic way for massage therapy and nutrition. So I actually became a certified holistic practitioner. And I was doing things in Calavie, some of the second largest spa in the world, and some of the amazing places. And then I got a phone call from this La Jolla company that said, Paul, we're looking for a debt settlement person. Do you know anything about that? I said, no, I really don't. So I drove down there and I met with the president and the vice president of the company, and they had lost all their negotiators for whatever reason. And they had a file cabinet filled with unfinished debt settlements. They didn't know what to do. So they said, can you do this? I said, show me a file and tell me what to do. That was my start. And within 30 days, I emptied the file cabinet. They were blown away. They hired 6 telemarketers to keep me busy because I learned how to do a settlement really fast and get absolutely incredible good results for my clients. And that's what started me. And then I transacted into real estate, paid my house off, had a great life. And then through the years, I went through different transitions, and I realized the things that I loved the absolute best were helping people in trouble get out of trouble and keep their employees, keep their business open, and not file bankruptcy. I know what bankruptcy is like. I went through it. In 2008, I lost $6.5 million and I went bankrupt. And I'll tell you, from living a millionaire lifestyle to literally living on floors and living rooms with my son and my dog because I lost everything because of the crash, I learned what it was like to be on both sides of the story. And when I realized the devastation that you feel when you lose everything, as time went on and I started to realize that I can't let this happen. And if I can, whoever I can help to stop this, that's what I want to do. Because I realized that it takes away everything inside you when here you've built something beautiful, you've got employees and everything's going great. And within a year, you've got nothing left. And you don't even have enough money to rent an apartment. And you're sitting there looking around going, what happened to my life? Well, I don't want that to happen to other people. And I think that's what the biggest driving force in me right now is, especially during this pandemic. I've seen good friends in restaurants and other areas that lost it. They lost everything. And I can't save everybody. And part of the problem that I want people to understand that have financial problems is you cannot wait until the last minute. In order to do a settlement and get rid of the debt, you have to have something left in your bank account or some asset or a friend that'll lend you money. Even if I settle it for 20, 30 cents on the dollar, if you don't have the 20 or 30 cents, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So there has to be a point where you realize that I have to take control of my life while I still have something left so that I can get rid of all of this debt or the majority of it and start rebuilding my life. And I'll give them all the pointers to rebuild. Matter of fact, if it's an individual that has any problems, I'll give them all the letters they need to rebuild their credit report for free.
Yeah.
If they're my client, it doesn't stop when I settle their debt. I have to give them the way.
I know. And Paul, we actually have another video that goes into more detail. So about all of those things, which is amazing. And I know you just want to serve so much. You can't help yourself. You're like, I gotta serve. And I love that. Today we're focused on you. So I've got a couple more questions about you.
Sure.
And the next question I have is the value that's most important to you. And I'm wondering if you can tell me, Paul, what is the value that is most important to you? That's been a value that's been important to you your whole life as a kid and now. What's one value you would fight for?
Integrity.
Tell me more.
It started when I was 5 years old. And it's when I was in the Cub Scouts. Now, nobody told me that I couldn't charge an extra 10 cents for a candy bar during a project because my brother wanted to sell me a BB gun for $3. Now, remember, this is back in the 1950s. So money was a different dollar out there. So I went out and I sold I sold 30 candy bars and I made $3 by charging an extra 10 cents. Well, what happened was about a week or so later, my dad comes up to me and says, "You've been kicked out of the Cub Scouts," with no way of ever explaining what I was doing, what was happening, no chance to saying, "I'm sorry," and nothing. He says, "You're out." my dad said, you don't ever break a rule. Now, my dad, he worked for the federal government. He had an IQ equal or better than Einstein. The guy was beyond brilliant. He worked on the first computers, the first solar systems, solar cells, the first everything out there from back in the 1930s on. And he had a reputation that if you walked up to him and tried to do a favor for him or bribe him, you would never do business with him or the government ever again. Period. If he had a say in it, you wouldn't do it. Integrity was number one in his world. All my life, living and growing up with my dad, I realized how important that was. Honesty and integrity take precedent over everything. Yeah, you can bend a few rules, but you can't break them. And for me, that's just the way it was. And that's why I ended up losing things, because I couldn't lie, cheat, or steal. It just wasn't in me. So that's probably my number one thing. And I realized that when I worked with Money and You for 20 years, still am, the Buckminster Fuller thing says integrity is the basis of all successful businesses. And I realized that it really is. Being who you are and being in integrity, that you do the best. It doesn't mean that you're right, and it doesn't mean that you're perfect. It just means that you do what you believe in as best as you can, and that you don't harm anybody knowingly. And that's where I'm at.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that story. Okay, speaking of stories, Paul, I want to stay in story time. Story time with Paul. This is like my favorite place to be. And I am looking for a very specific story. And the story I'm looking for is a safe story to tell. I'm aware that many people have been through a lot of things. So I'm looking for a safe story to tell, but I'm also looking for a stretching story to tell. So it's the one that you think, should I tell that? Yes, that's the story I'm looking for. It's when you're between the ages of 7 to 13. And it's a story where either you wish somebody would have had integrity and they didn't, you took a stand and you had integrity and it changed you, or you helped somebody else because of your integrity. Tell me the story.
From 7 to 13. That was a really long time ago. That's 60 to 65 years ago. Going back in my memory, 7 to 13. You know, there isn't any really one incident that really stands out. I think it's more the way I just was. But as far as integrity goes, that's a tough one. I can't pinpoint an exact instance in that time frame where I could say integrity was the reason the end result was the way it was. I don't know if I could create that. It was just who I was.
Yeah.
And
is there a story in your teens from 13 to 17 when you wish somebody would have had integrity? So let's expand it a bit. Between the ages of 7 to 18, when you wish somebody would have had integrity and they didn't.
I would be better if you said somewhere between 18 and 20. And the reason I say that is because when I graduated from high school and I went into junior college and I became the father of a fraternity,
yeah,
there were things that were going on within the fraternity, other things that integrity was a critical part, because we almost got kicked off the campus. And it only because the guys I was working with were a little on the rowdy side. And we weren't a Phi Beta Kappa giant national fraternity. We're a local fraternity, Sigma Alpha. And I literally had to stand up and literally chastise some of my own fraternity members for doing things that wasn't in integrity for the school. And it was rough, because when you're in a fraternity, you're supposed to support the fraternity and everybody in it. And when somebody does something wrong, and creates an issue, and you have to stand up and saying, that's not going to work in our fraternity. And either you clean your act up or you leave. And I'm kind of like the new kid on the block, but because of who I was, literally within the first, I'd say 60 days, they made me the father of the fraternity. And everybody came to me for help, whatever it was, personal life, in college life, because I was going for a degree in chemistry. They knew I was pretty smart. And I almost graduated with national honors from high school. I missed by 1 letter grade. But it was always people coming to me and wanting to do something that I go, that you can't do that in life. And I could take it to one step when I was working at a gas station, a Shell gas station, going to college. And I was literally going to school during the day, and I was working the midnight shift. And it wasn't until about 6 months later that Mel Merrick Shell in Santa Fe came to me with his daughter one day, and I was a mess. It was like 7 o'clock in the morning. I was getting off work. And he said, Paul, I want you to meet somebody. I said, who? He says, this is my daughter, and I wanted her to meet the only night shift person in 15 years that earned a commission. And I said, what do you mean? He says, you are the only person in 15 years that when they did side jobs repairing things at night, put the money in the till and recorded it. He says, you are the only one in 15 years of my business. And I wanted my daughter to understand what a person of integrity looks like. That stood out to me more than anything. I've never had anybody come up to me and say that. And here's a guy who owned 10 or 12 Shell stations, been doing this for 15, 20 years. And I was the only person ever to earn a commission because I put all the money in the bill. I said, sir, if you ever give me tools, I can earn a lot more. But everything I did was with a screwdriver and a pair of pliers. I was repairing brakes. I was fixing engines. I was doing everything. It all went into the till. And I remember that very, very strongly because I've never had anybody bring his daughter to me and say, I want you to meet this person because of his integrity. I want you to learn from it. So I would say that was the biggest story that I would have on integrity that stayed with me the rest of my life, because I knew that as long as I did what I was supposed to do and more, people would notice, and they always have. So that's where I'm at.
Paul, thank you so, so much. I am so grateful for you being willing to answer these questions with me today. And I got the beginning of your hidden story. So I would love, we got it, Paul. I'd love to share it with you. Can I share with you who I'm hearing you to be so far?
Sure.
Paul, who I hear you to be is somebody that cares deeply for the people that you work with. You've always cared for people, and doesn't matter what you've been doing in your life, whether it's Santa Claus for these sweet kids, or whether it's helping people to get out of debt, or whether it's helping business owners to not lose their business. Or whether it's in your fraternity, like being the father of your fraternity, helping people in the problems that they have. You've always been that trusted person.
Yes.
And I think that it is that way because the work that you do is really unique, but who you are is unique. You're somebody that cares deeply about people. You love helping people. It gives you so much satisfaction. And when you talk about the work that you do, how you do it is very different than how it's traditionally done. There's no payment plans, no upfront money, no administration fees, no consultation fees. You truly are in there helping people to get results. And it's amazing as you go through your process and how you really talk to the debtor, you talk to the creditor, you come up with a solution, you go over options, you see where they're at. But you don't just understand the money part of it, you understand the mindset part of it. You understand where they're coming from, the emotions of it. And like you said, 70% of the settlements are emotional. You get inside their heads. and you understand why they're making choices, why they're making those actions in ways that probably they don't even understand. But you do it because you're an expert at what you've done. You've done this for a long time. The
Yes.
other thing that I've seen about why you do this work is that you've been guided to do this work. Here you are, you were doing well, and all of a sudden you get this call saying, hey, Paul, I need somebody to help me with debt settlement. Do you know anything about that? And you say, no, I don't, but I'm willing to learn. And you go there, and all of a sudden in 30 days, you emptied out their filing cabinet and they're bringing on 4 people because you're doing such an amazing job. It's just the skill set that you have within you. I think it's because it's who you are. And the other piece to that, why you do the work that you do, is because you know what it's like. You know what it's like to have a lot of money and to be, and the challenges and excitements around that as well. But you also know what it's like to lose everything. You know what it's like to be bankrupt, to think, how did this happen to me? To have everything and lose it all. And you understand that, and you have empathy for people in that situation. And so you're really committed to doing anything you can possibly do to prevent that for everybody. And that's why your heart is just so big and you're so willing to serve. And I think that it goes back to who you are. The reason that this is so my favorite part, because all of this goes back to who you are as a kid, that you've always been this person to do this work. In fact, when you're a sweet little 5-year-old, you're an entrepreneur. You're trying to make some money. You're trying to get what you want. So you found a way to sell things for, the chocolate bars for a little extra. You made the money, and you didn't realize that was breaking a rule. You had no idea. In fact, your integrity was so high that you just wished you could have explained it. You could have helped people to understand, but you didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, I would have returned the money.
Totally. And this is going to tie into who you are in a minute. Now, the other piece to that is you've watched your dad, who has high integrity as well, and you understand what that looks like. Integrity is your most important asset. You also have lived that in your fraternity when you had to challenge your fraternity brothers, and you were at the very beginning of that relationship and had to challenge them and ask them to step it up and to step even more into integrity. Now, I think that part of the reason that you do what you do, when I think back to that sweet 5-year-old, is that you give people a chance, Paul, to make it right. You give them a chance to stand up and to find solutions. And when you were that 5-year-old, you didn't know the rules. You didn't know that you didn't understand what was happening. But now you know all of the rules. You know all of what's happening for the debtors and the creditors, and you walk them all through it so that they can be clean of it. They can walk proudly. They can have it settled. They can be complete. And I think that you do that because of who you are. You've always been the person that people come to for advice, support, because you're at the utmost integrity. Did I understand you right?
Yeah. It's been a long life. And, I don't think I'll ever change. And that's one of the reasons why I'm slowly working together to put a nonprofit as Santa Claus year round. Because I like helping homeless people. I like helping, especially endangered kids, battered women. They don't have a chance. They've been knocked around by society so badly that they don't know where it's going. So I'm working with a friend that may hook me into University of Irvine's homeless system, as well as a couple other ones around the country, so I can help even more. And right now I've been helping them understand how to raise money. I'm not really great at raising money, but I understand the principles behind it. So I've spent almost 2 hours just last week with a nonprofit out of Florida, which is a very important one for taking care of battered women, children, abused families and stuff. And I sat down with their attorney and some friends, and I went through a 2-hour process and really explained what it takes to do that. And one of the things that I imparted upon them is there's something called money follows management. And it's the principle of virtually every business in the industry, and it's how Wall Street looks at everything. If you want an investor to put money with you, They want to know who's running the company, not just the center CEO who maybe went from a hobby and knows really what he's doing to the CEO, but who's running the company. See, it's one thing to have an incredible talent. It's another thing to know how to build a business. They're completely different. And a CEO's job is to constantly raise money, not to micromanage how you're building the projects or whatever invention you have. There's a whole team it takes to create a really good business. It's like IBM when they first started. IBM did not have an idea of what they were going to do. There was a team of a group of some of the top people in the country that sat down in a room one day and said, what should we build? What should we do? And each one of these guys was just as smart as the next guy. So they came up with the idea of business machines because they knew that the country was growing and business machines were important. So they put their management skills behind it and created one of the largest companies in the country. But it was about management. It wasn't about the machine. It's about how you stand for integrity, how you put it out there, and how you support the end user. And they knew how to do all of it. And that's why they became as successful as they did. It's because the money follows the management, not the product. It's really strange. Now a product can have its own life. I'm just like some of the software we're seeing out there that, it's somebody invents something, next thing you know, within 2 weeks, they're a billionaire because somebody said, oh my God, you've got an amazing patent on something that nobody has ever even thought of, and it works for millions of people. We want it today, and it's going to cost you. So yes, the world is changing in how it works. But if you're building a business from scratch, if you're starting to grow out there and you want to do it, understand you've got to surround yourself by a team of people who are experts in what they do, or hire them. If you can't afford to bring them on as employees, hire a good attorney, hire a good marketing person, hire a good salesperson. Find out what your team is missing and find the best in your industry that supports your industry. Because not every marketer can market every type of thing. Even though marketing is generalized, it really isn't.
Yeah.
You have to know who your target is. So my thing to people is, if you want to start something, surround yourself by people that understand business and start taking some business courses. You may not like them, but at least understand what it is. And for people who have issues in debt right now, the number one thing that I ask people to do is create a budget. Get an Excel spreadsheet, find a budget calculator. There's tons of them out there for free. And write down for 90 days where every single solitary cent you have spent went. Mm-hmm. From the cash in your pocket to the debit card, to the credit card, whatever it is it food? Is it clothing? Is it a necessity? Or is it a want and not a need?
Yeah, Paul, that's amazing. And I know you have so many more tips, and I want people to connect with you. So connect with Paul. Paul is the real deal. You've heard a piece of his hidden story today. And I know Paul loves to serve and has so much valuable insight. Paul, how do people connect with you?
Well, there's a couple different ways. My corporate email is paul@wisewealthchoices.com. That's WISE, wisewealthchoices.com. Or my personal email is justcallpaul@gmail.com. So if you remember my name, Paul, just call Paul. Now, I know people out there say, yeah, just ask Saul, but no, it's not that. Just call Paul@gmail or paul@wisewealthchoices.com. And I'll get the email and I will respond back to any question you have. Anything, I don't care what it is. I'll give you a shot as to how to think about it, what it may be, or a place to research it, whatever it is, I will answer you.
Guys, I hope you understand the value of that. Paul is truly an expert. And I encourage you to take him up on that. Paul, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're more than welcome. Anytime you want me back, I have books and books of information that I love to give away.
I love it. Thank you so much for being with us today. And you watching, I encourage you to take action on what Paul has talked about today and let his story sink in. Let it change you. Be a person that is even more stepping into integrity. And until next time, let your fire light up the world, because the world needs you right now.
Thank you.